Chase's Mill is an historic water-powered mill located at the outlet of Lake Warren in East Alstead, New Hampshire. The first mill on site dates to 1767, and over the next 150 years, it served many functions for the local rural community, including lumber and grain production and small-scale wood product manufacturing. By the turn of the 20th century, the mill had fallen into disrepair, and in 1916, Hartley Dennett and Margaret Chase rebuilt the mill on the old foundation. However, after 100 years, the mill was in need of repair again. The nonprofit Mill Hollow Heritage Association was formed. They bought the mill, and in 2015, the rehabilitation work had begun. What follows are the highlights of the first 5 years of that rehabilitation work. First, the mill needed to be cleaned out. People needed space to work, to assess the condition of the building, the remaining woodworking equipment, and the water power infrastructure. With guidance from the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance and their award of the Rick and Duffy Monahan Grant, the Mill Hollow Heritage Association was able to get an engineering assessment completed by the end of the year. Small-scale repairs on things like windows and windowsills were undertaken. All the while, the public was kept informed of the progress at the mill, with open houses, weekend tours, and publications. But the work was only getting started, and the fundraising and grant-writing efforts continued. Throughout the summer of 2016, the mill was open on weekends for tours and special events. In July, the mill was added to the New Hampshire State Register of Historic Places. Later in the year, we received the first of our 2 L-Chip Awards from the state of New Hampshire. Now, the rehabilitation could really begin. The 2017 season began on a bitterly cold day in January, with the removal of some trees that were leaning precariously over the mill's roof. By spring, we had hired our architect, Dan Bartlett, and Ingram Construction to oversee the rehabilitation schedule, planning, and execution. Meanwhile, mill personnel continued to manage portions of the rehabilitation alongside Ingram Construction. Over the course of the year, a number of large-scale building rehabilitation projects were undertaken. The building was lifted and shored as near to level as possible, while exterior foundations were rebuilt and stabilized, as well as the interior stone piers. In the lowest level of the mill, a steel beam was installed, providing much-needed support, which carried through to every level of the building. Under the L, or the back part of the building, posts were added and repaired on the interior foundation pads. With these foundations now sound, we addressed the wooden timber structure of the mill. The undulating and sloping floors were corrected as much as was practical, augmenting and replacing floor joists with an eye toward upgrading the floor's load-bearing capacity. Meanwhile, overstressed and broken beams were repaired or replaced, and poorly joined beams and posts were finally connected properly. Temporary structural work was removed and replaced. Rotten decking, rafters, and plates were removed and repaired. Also, a concrete foundation was poured to support the chimney that was undermined in the 2005 Alstead flood. The 2018 work season began in March, with the entrance to the mill buried under drifted snow from ground to roof. The snow was cleared away so that the crew from Ingram Construction could get started. The roof structure needed strengthening. Rafters were sagging, roof valleys were collapsing. The ridgelines were settling, the dormers needed replacing, and the whole roof needed new shingles. The rafters were first. Each were jacked to reduce the sag and joined by a sister rafter of new wood. In places, existing rafters needed complete replacement, such as alongside dormers where leakage had allowed for rot. Dormers were rebuilt after careful study of historic photos. The existing roofing was stripped off of the whole building, and the rotted roof decking was replaced. In the L, the rot was so bad in the decking and pole rafters that its roof was very near collapse. With a new ridge beam, decking, and pole rafters installed, the roof was finally reshingled. The water power in the mill had been inactive for about 30 years. The penstock had rusted through and was unusable. Hydropower engineer Jay Bowery guided us on the restoration of the water power. The turbines were sent away for sandblasting and inspection, and repair, if necessary. The larger turbine, to our surprise, was pronounced in working order, with only one repair needed: the metal housing for the wooden lignum vitae thrust bearing on which the whole turbine and shaft spins. An easy fix. The housing was replaced, and the 100-year-old wooden lignum vitae bearing, still in perfect working order, was returned to service. A new penstock was fabricated from 20-inch steel pipes, inserted piece by piece into the mill and bolted together. After removing all the water, new concrete pads were poured on bedrock, and the turbines were bolted in place. Once the penstock pipe was reconnected, there was water power. And as soon as the old belts were replaced and aligned, the mill came alive again. Present to help us celebrate the return of the water power to the mill were Tom and Babs Putnam from the Putnam Foundation, which funded this water power restoration project. Work in 2019 began with replacing the mill's siding. After all of the old cedar shingles were removed, it was decided to reinforce the original board sheathing with some modern materials, adding rigidity to the whole building. Two sides of the building were very difficult to access, so staging was erected. And gradually, the mill was covered in new cedar shingles. Other aspects of mill function that also got some much-needed attention in 2019 were the dam and the mill pond. To address the upgrades to the dam, the mill pond needed to be drained down and the water diverted around the dam through an overflow culvert. Once the mill pond was empty, a new concrete entrance was constructed for water to enter the penstock, and a new stop log structure for the gate that empties the pond. The existing dam was anchored to bedrock in the bottom of the mill pond with bolts, and the whole section of the dam and bedrock were further tied together with a new 6-inch layer of reinforced concrete. By 2020, most of the building repairs had been completed, but a few things remained. Due to floor rot and an uneven approach, the public entry to the mill was not yet ADA accessible. To remedy this, the floor was dismantled, new beams installed to raise the floor, creating a flush floor and ground surface. An elevator was added to the east side of the mill, which is accessible from the L entrance area, providing safe access for all. By the end of 2020, the rehabilitated old mill was ready to officially open and welcome visitors, friends, family, and its neighbors once again. Thank you to everyone who made this happen. Our funders, donors, workers, and volunteers. We could not have done this without you.